Now, to emphasize the importance of the dialogue and the value of community involvement, we have asked the police chiefs and the sheriff to respond to questions of commitment about partnership with PAC's beloved community team and with community members within their cities.
As we announced earlier, just in time for tonight's public meeting, police departments in Campbell, Mountain View, Morgan Hill, Sunnyvale, and Santa Clara have responded to confirm that they are complying with SB 1421. And we are glad to hear from several chiefs, including Mountain View and Morgan Hill, that they will use standard city policy for fees for records, and that there are some departments that won't have production fees if they are digital records being requested. We urge the chiefs and the cities to not create a barrier for access to transparency by increasing fees for 1421 public records requests, especially when those requests are coming from community members and families who have lost loved ones.
Now we have the opportunity to hear more from the sheriff and the chiefs and the assistant chiefs who are in the room tonight. Leading this conversation will be Pastor Jason Reynolds, a senior pastor at Emmanuel Baptist Church, and Robert Aguirre, a community member.
Right. So first I want to say thank you to all of our chiefs, assistant chiefs, and the sheriff for being with us today. And I want to set the space. One of the things that we like to do is to create what we call dialogue, which means that we recognize that there are always feelings in the rooms and there are oftentimes disagreements. And we think that that's okay if we can do it in the right way. And as we've been working in our dialogue, there's always time where we can say what we believe and what we know that you should be doing because we think we know best. However, we also recognize that you're in your positions for a reason. And so we want to be able to hear from you. Now, that being said, we do have like a minute limit for each of you. Just know if you talk over a minute, you will be taking away time from your fellow chiefs and sheriffs. And again, I'm going to let you all work that piece out. I'll kind of do that myself. But to kind of open us up, we do have one question as it relates to SB 1421, the idea of additional transparency. We want to give you all space to talk about what you believe are some of those benefits and even some of those concerns, because we want to be able to hear those as a community, because we might see one side and we know that you may see another. So who would like to open us up in talking about SB 1421?
Don't be shy.
These guys are all waiting for me anyways. Hi, I'm Dave Knopf, I'm the Assistant Chief for San Jose PD. Thank you. Thank you. My one fan. Thank you, Gail. So what's important to me or important to us? So obviously it serves as a level of transparency for the community. It certainly does that. And it also will allow the department to show the community that we don't ignore, but we take officer misconduct seriously. I think that we've had our hands tied in the past because of the Peace Officers' Bill of Rights, and we're unable to convey certain levels of discipline or talk about police officer misconduct. So you're going to get a front row seat now. Concerns. Major concern we have is going to be a major impact to staffing and culling those reports. There are still victim and witness rights that we have to be respectful of. Unidentified or officers that aren't involved in that 1421, there's going to be a lot of redaction that's going to have to go on, and that is time consuming. And you're going to see that on the back end, and we're not going to be able to comply right away because it's going to take, really, time's up, a long time to get it. So the real benefits are, you'll be able to see the type of investigations we do and the disciplines that are imposed on the officers. Thank you.
Lori Smith from the Sheriff's Office. So as far as, and I'm going to echo a lot what the Chief just mentioned, but it really does provide transparency. It'll also be a look into how we conduct investigations, how our decision process is. And in all the cases that we've identified, we have found that they have all been terminated. So we're really fortunate in that area. As far as concerns, and I mentioned this in our small group, one of the concerns that I have, and the Sheriff's Office has taken the position that it is retroactive and we're releasing records. But one of the concerns I have is the law is very, very unsettled right now. We know that there's lawsuits around the state. Some of the courts have ruled not retroactive, some have ruled retroactive. We know it's going to go to the state Supreme Court, which it has not yet. And we will release records prior to, I'm sure, any kind of decision. So that's a concern, but that's our position, that's the position of our attorneys, and I think it's the position of most of the state, that it is retroactive. You'll be able to see the quality of the investigations that we do, how we make the decisions, and how we actually take the complaints very seriously and do real thorough investigations. I think the chief also mentioned something that I hadn't thought about, and that is there's very often times that we want to say what happened in a case and what the discipline was against the deputy, and our hands are tied sometimes when it is information that we really could help the community by us being able to talk. So that really is a benefit, I think, to it also.
Thank you, Sheriff. David Swing, by the way, Morgan Hill Police Chief, and just want to talk a little about some of the benefits around 1421 addition, what's already been said by my colleagues. When an incident of great bodily injury, use of force of great bodily injury, or also involved shooting occurs, our agencies invest a significant amount of time and energy and resources into that investigation to conduct a very thorough review. And 1421 will allow a snapshot or a view into that world and help illustrate to our communities how serious we as a profession take those types of incidents and how much we invest in those investigations. It'll also daylight in issues of misconduct, of dishonesty and sexual assault, that our profession, regardless of the role, our profession doesn't tolerate that type of activity. And those officers who have made those mistakes are dealt with severely and are mostly separated from employment in our profession. So it's a very serious, we hold the integrity of our profession very closely. In terms of concerns, the primary concern that I have is not necessarily with their retroactivity, but what that retroactivity will mean. When you take decades of information of issues of police misconduct and you release those, it's easy for someone outside of our profession to all of a sudden have a perception of widespread misconduct in law enforcement because of the amount of information from the over 100,000 peace officers in California that's being released all at once. It goes back for decades. And so I'm concerned, as we struggle with the narrative of policing in our nation and our state, how will 1421 help us bridge those relationships with our communities to help ensure that the narrative of policing is accurate with those we serve? I'll leave it with that.
Thank you.
We've got one already. So I'm Dave Carmichael. I'm with Campbell Police Department, and I think my colleagues really spoke eloquently about some of the benefits. But I think really looking around the room, this is one of the best benefits. I really enjoyed our group, and I think dialogue is what everybody wants. Law enforcement wants dialogue. The community wants dialogue. Nobody disagrees with that I'm aware of. Raise your hand, please, if you don't want to talk. I think that's why we're all here. And I think for me, it's very exciting. I think the sheriff and Assistant Chief Knopf said it very well, that I've been frustrated in my career when we are handcuffed with our inability to portray a good job or an investigation because it still has to go to court and there's so many things to work through. But with 1421, we may have an increased ability to really showcase some good work and explain things that the community wants to know, but previously we couldn't for some time until it works its way through the court system. Concerns, I agree that it is impacting staff. Fortunately, Campbell's pretty small, so we haven't experienced it too much. And I also just want to keep in mind for everybody that any use of force, even if it is justified, is really hard to see. It's always ugly to look at. And I just hope that people keep that in mind, that it sometimes requires context and understanding and explanation, and sometimes that's not captured in a 2-second or 2-minute soundbite.
Good evening, Dan Winter. I'm the Assistant Chief of Police for the Santa Clara Police Department. And yeah, much has been said already. We are releasing records. We have already released some records related to SB 1421. The benefits that I can see, through this transparency is that we will have some increased trust with our community. That's my hope, at least, is that this will bring a better amount of trust between the community and the police department. The concerns, I think many of them have already been stated. We are concerned about the personnel that it takes and to redact some of the records before they get released. There are some serious privacy concerns for those that are involved in some of these videos and audio tapes. There's medical information, there's other victim information that can't be released. So getting all of that information out of these records before they are released is a huge concern for the department, and how that will be done, the methods that it will be done is concerning for us. And another concern was raised tonight in my group. A person spoke up in our group, and she's concerned about the video of her loved one being shot released 5 years after the fact, and what that will do to possibly re-traumatize her and folks in her family. So that's also a concern.
Thank you. Fano, Chief of Sunnyvale Department of Public Safety, and it's good to be last tonight, because I agree with everything that my colleagues have said tonight. For me, as a law enforcement leader, and I think my colleagues who agree with me, is that we don't have a problem with transparency and accountability. I've been in this business for about 30 years. Have had the honor of working with a lot of these folks here, and I know that they didn't wait for this bill to come out to engage in their respective communities. I know that they didn't wait for this bill to come out to have a lot of progressive community programs in their respective departments. And I'll just speak on behalf of the Sunnyvale Department of Public Safety. We didn't wait for this bill to come out to make sure that we have the trust of our community. Some of the programs that we have in our department is the CIT program. We have a wraparound service CIT program in our department where we actually follow the person once we make contact with them and place them on a hold. We actually refer them to mental health services to make sure they get the help that they need. Recently, we updated the internal affairs process in our department. We didn't wait for a settlement agreement. We didn't wait for people to tell us, that we need to update to best practices. We did it ourselves. The strategic plan for the department, we have 6 areas that we took from 21st century policing. Procedural justice training, we implemented that, and our sworn personnel received the training recently.
Okay.
And
Thank you. Time's up.
all right, good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. A little while ago. No, you just stay down there. This is for all the techno-weenies in the audience here. We're doing LIFO, last in, first out. So you get the next question.
That was a trap.
All right. All right. So you've already eaten some of your time, so we got to keep it short.
Okay.
All right.
I'm done.
All right. What did you hear and learn in your dialogue groups, and what is the one most important thing you're taking away from tonight, and what changes will you implement? Go.
I think I was really happy to hear from a person in my group that has the same concern that I have, because while we support this bill in terms of transparency and accountability, my concern is the capacity of law enforcement to produce the materials in a timely manner and accurate information also. I was pleasantly surprised because I thought I was going to hear, hey, give up everything you have all the way back to 50 years ago, and we don't care how much it takes in terms of time and resources and stuff like that. So I was very happy to hear, from a community member that had the same concern that I did.
Yeah, I just appreciated the heartfelt stories and folks sharing their feelings in my group and things that had occurred to them. One statement that was said in my group was, her hope was that once, if this allows the story to come out sooner, and once we can agree on what occurred, on what the story was, then we can agree on if there needs to be a fix or if there was something that needed to be fixed. So that was the one thing that I took out of it.
I think my biggest takeaway was just the personal stories, and everybody has their own unique experience and their unique perspective. And to me, the big takeaway and what I'm looking forward to is just continuing that dialogue. I wish we had more time. I know we have our timekeeper over here doing a great job, but in our in our groups, I think we were just getting started. And so I'm looking forward to hopefully connecting more with the folks in our group and sharing additional stories as time goes on and just continuing to build. Because I think the magic can it's that interaction, that one-on-one interaction where the seeds are planted and trust can be built. And I think that this is just the beginning of that. So.
Well, first, I want to thank PACT for setting up the groups by geography. Being a South County chief and having a group here from Morgan Hill and Gilroy was very meaningful. So thank you to PACT for doing that. And what I heard in our group, in our limited time together, was the support for law enforcement. And that is so heartwarming. And it's so good to know that the residents of Morgan Hill and Gilroy who were here spoke supportively of the work that we're doing down in South County. And that's my biggest takeaway.
I really enjoyed the group and hearing the personal stories. I instinctively know it's difficult to understand the perception of other people. I see it from the law enforcement side, but hearing some of the stories, and I think the more we listen, the more we hear, the more we'll be able to understand people's feelings, what's going through their mind at the time. These stories were not just this happened to me, it was this is what I felt. And I think the more we can hear about what people are feeling and what their concerns are, and the words that we say in law enforcement, the actions that we take in law enforcement, what a profound effect it can have on a person from an early age. And those perceptions of law enforcement can continue forever. We need more dialogue, we need more conversation, and I really want to thank PACT too for putting this together, and our moderator. And thank you, Peter. It's good. The more conversation we have, the better, because we know that there's really a lack of trust in law enforcement, in the community. It's heightened in other areas. Some it's not as bad. Others it's worse. And I think that trust, if we don't have trust, we won't have anything in law enforcement, because we have to work together to solve problems in the community and to really make a better life. I know, I saw it.
So since you took all my time, so my takeaway is that we've made some progress, but then also we have a lot of things to work on still. So the one great thing is that we can get together and this dialogue will continue in the future. So I don't see PACT stopping and packing their bags and saying, that's it, this is great, this is the last one. So I'm sure there'll be more beloved community events that we'll be attending in the future, and that dialogue can continue. So.
All right, and I'd like to thank all the law enforcement officers that showed up. I think it's pretty brave to walk into a room like this and not know what you're going to be facing, but you're all armed.
Right, indeed. Well, I'll say this last piece to culminate it. One of the things that we want to make sure is that as we have these dialogues, and what we're hearing is that communication works well. And the goal for us is not just to communicate when things are good, but there are times when things get negative. And my hope is that the takeaway is not just, hey, we're going to show everything is always perfect. Nothing is perfect. But when something does show, when something is bad, that now we've developed enough relationship, we'd have enough community work that then we can get those things dealt with. And that's why we're here. We're not here because when everybody's high-fiving, that's great. It's the one time that we have that issue. And we want to build sufficient relationship now, so when it happens, because it will, not because of anybody is intentional, hopefully, but when it does, that then we can deal with it. And we're hoping always that you all will be able to take the leadership in that way. Can we thank our chiefs, assistant chiefs, and sheriff?